Jennifer Capriati was supposed to be tennis royalty forever. At just 13 years old in 1989, she became the youngest player ever to reach a professional tournament semifinal. By 14, she was beating top 10 players and being called the next Chris Evert. At 16 in 1992, she won Olympic gold in Barcelona and reached the Australian Open quarterfinals, becoming the youngest Olympic tennis champion in history. But here's the context that nobody saw coming. The pressure of being America's golden girl was crushing her. Every match was front-page news. Every loss was a national disappointment. Her father, Stefano, was controlling every aspect of her life, from training to media appearances. The constant spotlight was turning her teenage years into a nightmare. She was making millions in endorsements, but losing her childhood completely. The specific moment everything fell apart came on December 18th, 1993. Capriati was arrested for shoplifting a 15 ring from a mall in Tampa Bay. The mugshot of the Olympic champion made international headlines. 6 months later, in May 1994, she was arrested again for marijuana possession at a hotel. The girl who was supposed to dominate tennis for a decade was instead making headlines for drug arrests and legal troubles. The impact was devastating for American tennis and her career. Capriati's ranking dropped from number 6 in 1993 to number 66 by 1995, and she was briefly unranked in 1998. She spent nearly 4 years away from competitive tennis, dealing with depression and substance abuse. Sponsors dropped her, tournaments lost their biggest teenage draw, and an entire generation of American fans watched their hero self-destruct before their eyes. Mario Ancic was Croatia's golden boy, the player who was supposed to carry on the legacy of Goran Ivanisevic. At just 20 years old in 2004, he reached the Wimbledon semifinals with a massive serve, incredible court coverage, and the kind of all-court game that thrived on grass. He achieved his career-high ranking of number 7, and tennis experts predicted he'd win multiple Grand Slams within years. But here's the terrifying context. In late 2006, Ancic started feeling constantly exhausted during matches. He was losing to players he'd beaten easily before, struggling to finish sets and experiencing severe fatigue that rest couldn't cure. Doctors initially thought it was overtraining or stress, but the symptoms kept getting worse. His ranking began dropping, and nobody could figure out why this athletic machine was suddenly falling apart. The specific diagnosis that changed everything came in 2007. Ancic was diagnosed with mononucleosis, the kissing disease that attacks your immune system and leaves you completely drained. The virus destroyed his stamina and made intense training nearly impossible, though he managed a brief comeback in 2008, reaching the Wimbledon 4th round and climbing back to number 24. The damage was done. A subsequent back injury in 2010 finally ended his career. The impact was heartbreaking for Croatian tennis and Ancic's potential. He went from Wimbledon semifinalist to forced retirement in 2011 at just 27 years old. Croatia lost their next potential Grand Slam champion to a combination of illness and injury, proving that sometimes talent isn't enough when your own body betrays you. His career became a cautionary tale about how quickly health issues can derail even the most promising careers. Andrea Jaeger was the most feared teenager in women's tennis. At just 15 in 1980, she was beating established champions and climbing the rankings faster than anyone had ever seen. By 17, she'd reached the 1983 Wimbledon final, losing to Martina Navratilova, and made the 1982 French Open semifinals. She had a devastating serve, aggressive net play, and the kind of competitive fire that made grown women afraid to face her across the net. But here's the shocking context nobody knew at the time. Jaeger was secretly dealing with a serious shoulder injury that was getting worse with every match. Her father, Roland, was pushing her relentlessly, demanding she play through pain that was becoming unbearable. The tennis world saw a fierce competitor, but behind the scenes, she was taking painkillers just to get through matches and crying herself to sleep from the agony in her shoulder. The specific moment that changed everything came during the 1985 season when she was just 20 years old. Jaeger's shoulder finally gave out completely during a match, requiring immediate surgery. But instead of fighting back to tennis like everyone expected, she made one of the most shocking career decisions in sports history. She walked away from tennis forever, eventually becoming a Dominican nun and dedicating her life to helping underprivileged children through her Little Star Foundation. The impact was unlike anything tennis had ever seen. Jaeger went from Grand Slam finalist to complete disappearance, trading her racket for a habit and her prize money for charity work. While other players like Margaret Court pursued religious paths after tennis, Jaeger's transition to nunhood at such a young age remains unique in tennis history. Her story proves that sometimes the biggest victories happen far away from any tennis court. If you're loving this video, subscribe now and help us hit 5,000 tennis fans by month's end. Mardy Fish was America's last great hope in men's tennis. At 20 years old in 2002, he was already in the top 20 and climbing fast. By 2011, he'd reached his career-high ranking of number 7 and made the Wimbledon quarterfinals, becoming the highest-ranked American man since Andy Roddick. He had a powerful serve, aggressive baseline game, and the mental toughness to beat anyone on his best day. American tennis fans finally had someone to cheer for again. But here's the terrifying context that nobody saw coming. Fish had been dealing with anxiety and panic attacks for years, but he kept it secret from everyone except his closest family. The pressure of being America's #1 player was eating him alive. He was having trouble sleeping, experiencing chest pains during matches, and taking medication just to get through press conferences. The stress of carrying American tennis expectations was literally affecting his heart. The specific diagnosis that changed his career came in 2012. Fish was diagnosed with atrial fibrillation, a heart rhythm disorder that required catheter ablation treatment. The procedure addressed the immediate heart issue, but the underlying anxiety and panic attacks became overwhelming. He struggled to compete at the highest level, taking extended breaks and battling mental health issues that made professional tennis nearly impossible. The impact was devastating for American men's tennis and Fish personally. Though he continued playing until 2015, he was never the same competitor. His ranking dropped as he fought anxiety, depression, and the reality that his mind and body couldn't handle the stress of professional tennis anymore. America lost its last top 10 player, and Fish's brave openness about mental health helped break barriers in professional sports. Tracy Austin was a tennis phenomenon like the world had never seen. At just 14 years old in 1977, she made her Wimbledon debut and was beating established professionals. By 16 in 1979, she'd won the US Open, becoming the youngest champion in the tournament's history. She had perfect technique, incredible court sense, and the kind of mental maturity that made her seem like a veteran despite being a teenager. But here's the devastating context that would destroy her career. Austin's body wasn't built for the physical demands of professional tennis. She was small, barely 5'4", and the constant pounding on hard courts was destroying her spine with every match. Doctors warned her family about the long-term damage, but the success was too intoxicating to stop. She was making history and millions of dollars while her back was slowly breaking apart. The specific injury that ended everything happened gradually throughout 1982 and 1983. Austin's back problems became so severe that she could barely walk, let alone play tennis. She underwent multiple surgeries, spent months in bed, and tried comeback after comeback, but the damage was irreversible. The girl who'd won Grand Slams as a teenager was forced to retire at just 21 years old. Her career destroyed by the very sport that had made her famous. The impact was heartbreaking for tennis and Austin's legacy. She went from US Open champion to medical retirement before most players even reached their prime. Her career earnings were cut short by millions. Her potential Grand Slam titles were lost forever. And she became a cautionary tale about the physical toll of professional tennis. Austin proved that sometimes being the youngest and best isn't enough when your body can't handle the pressure of greatness. Taylor Dent had one of the most devastating serves in tennis. At 21 years old in 2003, he was hitting serves at 149 miles per hour and climbing toward the top 20 with a game built entirely around power. He reached the Wimbledon quarterfinals in 2004, made multiple ATP finals, and had a serve so fast that return specialists like Andrea Agassi struggled to even touch the ball. Tennis experts predicted he'd dominate the sport for years with his unique serve and volley style. But here's the brutal irony that would end his career. Dent's massive serve was destroying his own body with every match. The violent motion required to generate 149 ms serves was putting incredible stress on his back, and the repetitive trauma was creating problems in his spine. He was literally breaking himself apart to hit the shots that made him famous, and the damage was accumulating faster than his body could heal. The specific injury that changed everything came during the 2006 season. Dent developed spondylolisthesis, a serious back condition that required surgery in 2007. Though he managed to come back in 2008-09, reaching number 21, the recurring back problems made consistent, high-level tennis impossible. Every powerful serve risked further damage, and he was forced to retire in 2010 at just 29 years old. The impact was devastating for American tennis and Dent's potential legacy. He went from top 20 player with one of the fastest serves in tennis to complete retirement before reaching his prime. His unique playing style died with his career, and tennis lost one of its most exciting power players. Dent became proof that sometimes your greatest weapon can become your worst enemy, and that the human body has limits that even the most talented athletes can't overcome. Melanie Oudin was America's tennis fairy tale come to life. At just 17 years old in 2009, she shocked the tennis world by reaching the US Open quarterfinals as a wildcard, beating former world #1 Jelena Dokic and fourth-seeded Elena Dementieva along the way. She had "Believe" written on her shoes, an infectious smile, and the kind of fearless game that made impossible shots look routine. American fans fell in love with their new tennis princess, but here's the crushing reality that followed her breakthrough. Oudin's success was built on confidence and momentum that proved impossible to sustain. The pressure of being America's next tennis star was overwhelming for a teenager who'd never experienced anything like the media attention and expectations. Every match became a referendum on whether her US Open run was real or just a fluke, and the weight of those expectations crushed her natural game. The specific decline that ended her promise came gradually over the following years. Oudin's ranking dropped from her career high of number 31 in April 2010 to number 139 by the end of 2012. She struggled with injuries, including a serious case of rhabdomyolysis in 2013, lost confidence in her game, and seemed to lose the fearless attitude that had made her special. The girl who'd beaten top 10 players was suddenly struggling against much lower-ranked opponents. The impact was heartbreaking for American tennis in Oudin's career. She went from US Open quarterfinalist to struggling on the lower-level ITF circuit, her ranking continuing to drop as injuries and confidence issues mounted. Her Cinderella story became a cautionary tale about how quickly tennis dreams can turn into nightmares and how the pressure of early success can destroy the very qualities that created that success in the first place. Thomaz Bellucci was Brazil's golden boy, the player who was supposed to follow in Gustavo Kuerten's footsteps. At 22 years old in July 2010, he'd reached his career-high ranking of number 21 and was making deep runs at major tournaments. He had incredible clay court skills, a powerful forehand, and the kind of mental toughness that Brazilian fans hadn't seen since Kuerten won the French Open. Tennis experts predicted he'd be Brazil's next Grand Slam contender, but here's the devastating context that nobody understood at the time. Bellucci was battling severe depression and anxiety that was getting worse with every tournament. The pressure of being Brazil's only hope in men's tennis was crushing him mentally, and he was struggling with panic attacks during matches that he kept hidden from everyone. The tennis world saw a rising star, but behind the scenes, he was falling apart psychologically. The specific breakdown that ended his promise came during the 2012 season. Bellucci's mental health issues became so severe that he couldn't function normally during matches, experiencing panic attacks that made it impossible to compete at the highest level. His ranking began a steady decline from the top 25 to outside the top 100, and he was forced to take extended breaks from tennis to deal with his psychological struggles. The impact was devastating for Brazilian tennis and Bellucci's career. He went from top 25 player and potential Grand Slam threat to struggling with basic match situations due to mental health issues. Brazil lost their best chance at having another Grand Slam contender, and Bellucci became one of the first players to openly discuss how mental health problems can destroy even the most talented careers. His story highlighted how the pressure of professional tennis can break minds just as easily as it breaks bodies. Jelena Dokic was supposed to be tennis royalty. At just 16 years old in 1999, she shocked Wimbledon by beating world number 1 Martina Hingis in the first round, then reached the semifinals. By 19 in 2002, she'd reached the world number 4 ranking and made the French Open quarterfinals. She had incredible power, court coverage, and the kind of fearless game that made established champions nervous. Australia and Serbia both claimed her as their future tennis queen, but here's the horrifying context that nobody knew. Dokic's father, Damir, was physically and emotionally abusing her behind closed doors, controlling every aspect of her life with threats and violence. He would scream at her during matches, threaten coaches and officials, and create chaos wherever they went. The tennis world saw a talented teenager, but Jelena was living in constant fear of her own father, trapped in an abusive relationship that was destroying her mentally and emotionally. The specific breaking point that changed everything came during 2000-2001. Unable to take the abuse anymore, Dokic made the incredibly brave decision to distance herself from her father's control. Though she continued playing and reached number 8 in 2001, the family dysfunction took its toll. Her major disappearance came in 2005 to 2006 when personal struggles and the aftermath of years of abuse caused her ranking to plummet to number 6 on 17. The impact was devastating, but ultimately inspiring. Dokic lost years of her prime and millions in prize money while recovering from the trauma of abuse. She missed crucial development years and had to overcome psychological damage that went far beyond tennis. But her courage to escape an abusive situation and eventually return to tennis made her one of the most inspiring comeback stories in sports history, proving that sometimes disappearing is the bravest thing you can do. If you're loving this video, you click on the super thanks button and support our channel. Florian Mayer was German tennis precision personified. He reached the Wimbledon quarterfinals in 2004 at age 20, showing incredible court sense and the kind of methodical game that German tennis fans loved. By June 2011, he'd achieved his career-high ranking of number 18 at age 27, making consistent, deep runs at major tournaments. Tennis experts saw him as a steady top 20 player representing the next generation of German tennis excellence. But here's the cruel reality that had destroyed his promise. Mayer's body couldn't handle the physical demands of staying at the top level of professional tennis. He began suffering a cascade of injuries that seemed to never end. Shoulder problems, back issues, knee surgeries, and muscle strains that kept him off court for months at a time. Every comeback attempt was followed by another injury, creating a cycle of hope and disappointment that lasted for years. The specific breaking point came during the 2008 season when multiple injuries hit simultaneously. Mayer's shoulder required surgery, his back problems became chronic, and his ranking began a steady decline from the top 20 to outside the top 100. He spent more time in rehabilitation than on tennis courts, and his once promising career became a medical nightmare that no amount of German engineering could fix. The impact was heartbreaking for German tennis and Mayer's legacy. He went from consistent top 20 player to injury-plagued journeyman, his ranking dropping so far that he needed wildcards to enter tournaments he'd once dominated. Germany lost one of their most promising players to the cruel reality that talent means nothing when your body refuses to cooperate. Mayer's story became a reminder that professional tennis demands not just skill, but a body capable of withstanding years of punishment that would break most people. We arrived at the end of our video. You can enjoy our next video here.